Yes, very good friends. I've been to NASCO. I have a meeting next week. You're going to NASCO. I will take you to NASCO. Okay, you can take it. Fine. That's it. Thank you. Thank you very much. You are a good leader. Yeah, thank you.
We have confidence in the Iebc having the capacity to deliver this election if they are not interfered with. It is, however, obvious and clear to us that there are functionaries in government who want to undermine the capacity of the Iebc to deliver a credible, transparent, democratic election. That is unacceptable to the people of Kenya. When when public officials take positions that are contrary to their oath of office, to the dictates of the Constitution, they are not only sabotaging the Constitution, but they are active agents of undermining a credible, transparent election. Public officials in charge of ICT, when they make statements that they are in charge of data that will make whichever side win, that undermines the credibility of the election. And we expect
ati wanaketi kwa maofisi na mahoteli, ati wanasema ndio watutuamulia mambo ya taifa letu la Kenya. Ati wao kwa sababu wako na pesa nyingi, wako na uwezo, wameteka nyara nchi yetu, wameteka nyara uchumi ya nchi yetu, wanataka kuteka nyara siasa ya nchi yetu. Ati wao watufanye ati sisi ni watumwa wao. Watu wa Nakuru, mtakubali hiyo story? Ati watu wachache wanaketi chini kwa mahoteli na maofisi ati kutupangia, ati kwa sababu wako na pesa. Mwaka huu tunawaambia mtajua, tutajua, watajua. Mwaka huu watu wa Nakuru na waomba kwa unyenyekevu, kwa sababu wale ambao wanataka kutupangia ati uongozi wa Kenya ni kwa sababu wameteka nyara nchi yetu, na wanataka uongozi wa Kenya ambayo itakuwa kibaraka, ambayo italinda haki yao na mali yao na mambo yao. Lakini tunawaambia Wakenya mamilioni wanataka serikali itakayowainua, itakayopanga mambo yao, itakayopangia ajira watoto wao, itakayopanga kila mtu awe na pesa mfukoni. Na hiyo ndio serikali tunataka kuunda na Kenya Kwanza, akiwemo Musalia, akiwemo Weta, akiwemo viongozi hawa wote. Tunakubaliana jameni? Tunakubaliana? Ndio mimi nataka niwaambie kwa unyenyekevu, huu mwaka ni mwaka wa muhimu sana. Hii uchaguzi ni uchaguzi wa muhimu sana, kwa sababu watu wachache kwa kiburi na madharau eti wanafikiria ya kwamba kwa sababu wameteka nyara uchumi wa taifa letu, ati pia wanaweza kutaka nyara uongozi wa taifa letu la Kenya. And we are telling our friends, you may have captured the economy of our nation. You may have influence. You may also have money. But this year, we are going to make sure as the citizens of this nation that we claim our nation back and we claim our economy back.
Friends of Kenya, like the EU, to speak to those issues, because the issue of a credible election is good for everybody, including our partners. We will take a position as a party. We are writing to the Iebc. You have seen in the media that there was an attempt to obliterate names from the Iebc register, and so far, almost 800,000 names. 800?
Yeah.
About a million names have somehow disappeared from the register. It's in the public domain, and I think even the Iebc have said they are doing some remedial steps. Those kind of attempts are dangerous, especially when certain public officials are chest thumping that they have the so-called system and the deep state to manipulate. We expect that everybody who is concerned, including the EU, to try and get as much detail as possible, both from the Iebc and from these public officials, on what this all is about and how did close to 1 million names disappear from the register. And many of those names are people from what we consider our stronghold. So there is a clear attempt to try some monkey games. We don't believe they will succeed, but these attempts are a source of concern to Kenyans. We are Democrats. When you go into an election, there can only be two outcomes. You win or you don't. We are very strong believers that government is not just those who win. It is also those who keep government in check. That's what constitutes a working government. And therefore, we are very clear. And we are ready to sign any declaration to that effect. We're only worried the other side, they don't have a record of accepting the outcome of any election. And hopefully they will be willing to sign as well. I hope they do.
So the whole concept of how debt has been accumulated in the last few years is going to be something of very serious concern. And we will need a very clear partnership with yourselves on how to resolve this. Because we have no intention of reneging on our debt obligations. But however, there's more than meets the eye. We have a very serious obligation which will require a lot of dialogue going forward in trying to tackle this debt crisis that nobody wants to admit is real and is with us now. And we say so because it's going to have serious implications on all the other programs or economic programs that the Deputy President has highlighted here, and some of which you are involved in. So let's just put it very clearly that we shall not take this issue of debt for granted. There are going to be a few issues that people may have to seek questions to. We were in cabinet much earlier when the expressway was mooted, And at that time, the proposed expenditure was about 27 billion. Right now, we are talking of a project that has escalated to about 88 billion. So there are a lot of issues that will have to be dealt with in between for accountability for the Kenyan people to understand what is really going on some of these issues. Yet the debt is now on our laps. We will have to tackle it, but there are issues that need to be looked at. We have had to live or contend with the fact that some of these programs and debts have been accumulated or committed without the requisite cabinet approvals going forward. So we are dealing with a situation where when we say the economy first, it is true we have to address the cost of living and the welfare of the people, but we will also have to have a very serious explanation made to the Kenyan people as to how we got to some of these situations in the first place. You talked of the code of conduct where signatures have got to be obtained by political players, asking Kenya Kwanza team to make sure that they're ready to sign and so forth. Now, this code of conduct process, it should be broadened. Where's the code of conduct for the media? I don't know whether you've been observing that some media houses are on a mission to literally black out other political players. There's one media house that is particularly notorious, no names for now, but they are giving the other side 20 minutes of airtime, and they give our side about 4 minutes, and if you're very lucky, 5 minutes on that day. And the mission is very simple, to try and paint the impression that the other side is gaining. So if there's a code of conduct, if you're going to engage, I think we would call upon the international community to have a serious conversation with the media houses in Kenya. They're behaving unethically in this event. And the process of building up to a free and fair election also requires that the media houses play their role. They should also execute codes of conduct so that we can start measuring very clearly, and you can also have a way of measuring, are they being fair in ensuring and creating the environment that will be right for a free and fair election. Because it is through such bias reporting that they stoke the problems of political intolerance when the election is being done. We think that that should be handled through partnerships like ours. Thank you.
Thank you.
That elections are not judged free and fair on the basis of the conduct on the day of voting. Is the entire process, the integrity of the voters' roll, the conduct of the electoral officials, the conduct of the state machinery responsible for security, and so on and so forth. I'm sure the EU has always been a close observer of our electoral process, and you can see and feel where things are not going right, and we expect to hear your voice. On the issue of refugees from Her Excellency, the Slovak ambassador, every country, in fact, indeed, humanity expects that we should not have refugees. That's the ideal situation. But Kenya has been a host to refugees from almost all our neighbors, except Tanzania, that has not given us any significant flow of refugees in our history. As it is today, conflicts in the region have been subsiding. And we have been encouraging refugees where they can find it possible to go back to their countries. Of course, under the UN and other international protocols, you can't force refugees to go back to where they ran away from. So we continue partnering with yourselves and others, and I want to appreciate, having been in foreign affairs for 10 years, the role your delegation and individual countries have contributed towards the management of the refugee situation in Kenya. And as a country, we have also passed a law that encourages some of the refugees to get integrated within our country and within neighboring countries where they would wish to go. So we'll continue doing that to see that we get to an ideal situation where no human being should be. We have a very comprehensive law on refugees that allows them to go through our schools up to university level and so on and so forth. But on the issue of M-Pesa, for example, even people at our level, if you don't have an identity, you cannot access the M-Pesa process. So it's something that we can engage in a conversation for you who help in financing refugee activities. If you find electronic money transfers an easier way of managing your resources, it is something that we can talk and as a government find what to do. On the Ukraine conflict, Kenya, since our independence, believes in the territorial integrity and independence of every country. There's no justification whatsoever, howsoever, for any country to invade another. And when such a situation occurs, again, we believe in the multilateralism of solving conflicts through, if it's in Africa, we have our AU Peace and Security Council. If it is the outside Africa, we have the UN Security Council that needs to engage. But we also know that the Ukraine-Russia conflict is very complex. It has taken a lot of dimensions with almost throwing us back to the Cold War situation where you are either a friend of Russia and therefore supporting them regardless of what they are doing, or you are a friend of the Europeans and you support Ukraine regardless of what you feel. We as Kenya have always stood for territorial integrity, respect for every country and its independence. And that position has not changed, may not change, I believe. And we shall stand as Kenya Kwanza government, when we form government, for that respect of each country.
Thank you.
I'm serving my second term as a governor, and I've faced the brunt, the excellencies, of not getting funds coming in on time. And a lot of it has to do with the bureaucracy. The current government is very bureaucratic. And as Kenya Kwanza and the deputy has said, we need to, cut down on the bureaucracy. Wherever we have funds that come directly to us as counties, from European partners, it works better. You see the Danida funds and all the processes that go in. We're now benefiting from the climate change funding. So we're also looking at, as part of the conversations, the direct funding that come in. Now that I have the microphone also, just to comment on two things. This whole issue of elections and transfer of names and everything, I would call it pre-election rigging, because that's what it is. It is actually rigging that is done before the election, pre-election rigging. And to add on to the words of Moses Tangula, that when you engage with the other parties, you bring it up, but also we'd like to hear the voice of the European Union publicly. We'd like to hear you coming out and talking about it publicly and asking questions so that Kenyans know it's a matter of concern. And lastly, the bottom-up versus bottom versus up. You see, our economic model is based on, as we bring people up from poverty, we also widen the base, which means that we'll be collecting taxes from a wider base because more people will be making money. When that happens, you grow a middle class. As you grow a middle class, the up also benefits. So it is beneficial to everybody. So you have to take care of the bottom to ensure that it doesn't pull up down. And that is where we are looking into it. Which also brings the point Madam Ambassador asked about, and this is the concern about investments. And as Kenya Kwanza, we've been having discussions about the investments coming here. We know that companies investing in Kenya from Europe tend to be quite frustrated, especially by the bureaucracy and the procedures, and also by the judicial system. You heard Deputy President talk about funding the judiciary and enabling the judiciary to work quickly, so that if you invest in Kenya and there's a commercial litigation, you know it's going to be fair and it will be expedited quickly, so that you can be able to move your money around and be able to make your decisions. So we're very key on investments and also partnering with European nations, which we've partnered with for a long time, to enable them to grow. I'm in Machakos. You talked about the coffee, roasting and everything. It's happening in Iebc in Machakos, where I'm the governor. So we've seen the benefits of some of these things of adding value, and we know that we can work together. Thank you.
The fact that we see civil servants and public officers and state officers participating actively in politics, campaigning, and going as far as chest thumping, and no action whatsoever is taken by the EACC or the DCI, tells you that whatever it is that we are talking about, weaponization of these independent investigative institutions, is actually true. And while you engage with them, I think would appreciate very much if that issue could be raised, because if truly the independent institutions were doing their work, those civil servants by now should have been required to resign or should have been arraigned in court. In fact, the law says that if a public servants get involved in politics and they're taken to court, and it's proven that they have been, that they risk a jail term of 3 years. It's actually in the law of Kenya, but nothing happens because they are in their other side. And the second thing I would like to say on the issue of the independent institutions, that our commitment will be not just to make them independent, but to also professionalize them. I think it's important that these institutions know what it is that they're supposed to be doing when they are investigating and not getting involved in political partisanship because they want to advance a certain agenda or a narrative that is not beneficial to anyone in this country just because they do not agree or disagree with one side of the coalition. Resources are given to provide services, and services are given to people, and it's a very big consideration that population should be considered. The other thing is that there have been very many functions that have been devolved, are required to be devolved according to the Constitution, but they remain very much being implemented by the national government. And His Excellency has given us that commitment that these functions that are still held at the national level will be transferred. There are functions in agriculture, there are functions in health, there are functions in water. Recently, they have transferred the functions for libraries. That was outstanding, but we still have quite a number of functions in agriculture, water, and health especially, that are still being carried out at the national level, whereas the law requires that these functions should actually be transferred and be carried out at the county level. The issue of the flow of resources, again, we've had that commitment that as required by law, that the resources to the counties will be considered together with the salaries of all civil servants as a first charge, and not to be adjusted arbitrarily as has been the case in this current regime, and that the resources will actually be timely and will be consistent. The final one is we've raised, and the reason I say that we have gotten this commitment, I'm sure you know that the Deputy President has been the chair of Iebc. He has seen our frustrations as governors, and one of the other issues was also on the matters to do with development financing. Right now, as we speak, we have over 30 billion shillings that is held, development partner financing that has not been given to counties. My county specifically has over 500 million shillings being held by the National Treasury, and we're at risk of losing the money because the financing is coming to an end in August. But for some reason, because of the lack of the the attempt by the National Treasury to change the mode of dispersing of these resources. These resources have not reached the counties. So that's another issue that the Deputy President, who will be President, who has given our commitment that will make sure that this actually is streamlined and flows from development partners will be efficient. Thank you.
In all the subsequent elections, the voice of the European Union member states is critical. It helps the IEBC build credibility. It helps the IEBC build a stable system. So I think you need to speak not for Kenya Kwanza, not for our competitors, but for a free, fair, and transparent election.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is about the intention of the government of Kenya in Nairobi and all its constituencies to enable the economic development that we see to also include these small counties and some of the very poor regions which are not only struck but also prone to conflicts due to what's happening because of climate change and security issues in other countries. So that's question number one. Number two is with regard to investment. We heard pretty much yesterday also about the large investments in infrastructure that has been going on. And I myself yesterday wondered about how much employment has that created in Kenya. And I wonder, what possibilities do you see that Kenya has now to include in the procurement processes job creation for Kenyans when you invest in large infrastructure or in agriculture, because otherwise it might not happen. Thank you.
I have two questions, and I'll take the opportunity to be very open and frank as we have this opportunity, of course. First one, I would like to ask you about your plans with refugees and what would be the steps that you will be taken when they will be able to, for example, use M-Pesa or have a cheaper bank account than normal people in order to be fully implemented. It is about the policy of their inclusion into society. And second, the refugees coming in, yes, of course. And the second one, of course, Slovakia is a neighbor of Ukraine. We are doing our best to allow the situation to cease. My president was at the Ukrainian parliament. She was there physically yesterday, 2 days ago, and addressed it, of course. What is your future plan to address the issue?
So, in the name of all the ambassadors and all the deputy ambassadors present here, thank you very much for taking so much time for the good breakfast. And I wish you all best of luck. This will be charging days, weeks, and months ahead. It's a very, very difficult race. But the EU will be here as a neutral observer and supporter of this democratic process. Because, as I said, for us, Kenya is a democratic and stable country and needs to remain so, because our international and global atmosphere really is not allowing for any country to go down. So we really need Kenya to stay strong and tall in the elections and beyond the elections. So thank you very much in the name of everybody, and we will continue our dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Tele kwa watu wa Nairobi, watu wa Mukuru kwa Jenga, watu wa Embakasi South. Kwanza mimi nilifika hapa wakati mlipomolewa. Mimi nilikuwa mtu wa kwanza kufika.